In our studies, we have come across monopolies, where one firm is the sole producer of goods in a market. But what about markets where there are two or three firms that are equally powerful? This type of market is known as an oligopoly. We can identify an oligopoly because the combined market share of a few large firms far outweighs the remaining firms. This is known as the concentration ratio. We can find the concentration ratio by dividing the market share of the few largest companies by the total market share. Let's look at an example to better understand this. Imagine an example where we have hundreds of different supermarkets in a country. The three biggest supermarkets control 90% of the market, and the remaining supermarkets only account for 10%. This is an example of an oligopoly because the market is almost entirely controlled by just a few firms. An oligopoly has some defining features. Firstly, there is product differentiation. Because there is more than one firm selling a certain product in a market, they may seek to differentiate their product by slightly changing the product or advertising in a different way. Also, the firms in an oligopoly are interdependent. This means that they are affected by the decisions of other firms in the oligopoly. For example, if one firm dramatically changes its price, the other firms may have to also adjust their price in order to compete. In order to further study oligopolies, it helps to introduce an example scenario. Let's look at a duopoly. This is an oligopoly with only two large firms. Whether we look at two firms or more, the principles stay the same for the most part, so it is easiest to just look at a duopoly. Imagine a busy street full of offices. Two businesses set up a coffee stall on either side of the road. They are the only coffee stalls around, and so the workers will come to them for coffee. Let's also pretend that making the coffee is free. If each stall only sold 1 cup of coffee a day, you can imagine that the coffee would be very highly priced. As a result, there will only be a handful of people willing to pay this price for the coffee. As the price drops, more people begin to see the price as reasonable, and so the demand will increase. This is an example of a downward sloping demand curve. Let's imagine that for €5, there will be a quantity sold of 20. For €4, 40 coffees will be sold, and so on until we reach €1 where 100 units will be sold. Doing some basic maths, we see that it's most profitable to sell coffee for €3, as the stalls will make €180 a day. The ideal situation here for the stalls is that both stalls sell 30 units each at a price of €3. Even though this leaves a shortage of supply, this generates the most revenue in the market for the firms. This could be achieved if both firms cooperate. This is known as collusion, and the firms that are working together are known as a cartel. The problem with this is that the firms in an oligopoly are now working together, and so they are no different to a monopoly. For this reason, many countries have competition laws in place to prevent this from happening, as it leaves consumers worse off. Since cooperation is against the rules, the owner of stall A has another thought. Rather than selling 30 units for a total revenue of €90, he could sell 50 units at a price of €2, which would generate €100 for him. Even though this isn't ideal for the market as a whole, the owner of stall A will make more money as he has a larger market share. There is a big problem, however. If the owner of stall B has the same idea, they will both try to sell 50 units, which will mean that 100 units are available and that they will have to reduce their price to €1, and both will only stand to make €50 each. So now, how does either stall owner know what to do? Selling the coffee at €1 seems to lose the stall's money, rather than selling 30 units at €3. So let's consider another approach. If both stalls lower their prices to €2, they will lose money. Going up or down seemingly loses you money. Sure, you could lower your prices in the hopes that your competitor keeps theirs the same and you will make more money, but if they have the same idea, you both lose out. Out of fear for losing money, you stay where you are. So it seems that selling coffee at €3 is some sort of equilibrium. This type of equilibrium is known as Nash equilibrium, named after the mathematician John Nash. To put the definition of Nash equilibrium more broadly, it describes a situation where each actor chooses the best strategy for themselves based off the strategies that all other actors have chosen. Let's look at how oligopolies set their prices. A good way of choosing your price is by looking at two effects. Firstly, the price effect, which states that as you raise production, more units are sold, which lowers your price because of the downward sloping demand curve. This will lower the profit on all other units sold. And secondly, the output effect. As the price is above the marginal cost, selling more coffees will raise profits. If the output effect is larger than the price effect, the production of coffees should be increased. If the price effect is larger than the output effect, the production should not be raised and may even be lowered. So we've seen demand curves appear in our studies of competitive markets and in monopolies, but there is an interesting phenomenon in oligopolies where we may observe a so-called price stickiness. This is the idea that over time, prices in an oligopoly will not change much. There is an underlying logic to this, however. Let's revert back to our two coffee stalls to explain it better. Stall A is considering raising its prices from €3 to €4 in the hopes of making more money. But Stall A realizes that Stall B has no incentive to raise its prices, and so more customers will go to Stall B as it is cheaper. Stall A will actually lose customers by raising its prices in this scenario. However, if Stall A was to lower its prices, Stall B would immediately lower theirs as well to stop Stall A getting a larger market share. This would happen because more customers would go to Stall A for the cheaper coffee. If we assume that Stall B is thinking the same way, there's no good reason for either stall to change their price. If they go up, they will lose market share, and if they go down, their competitor will immediately match them. Because changing price won't have the desired effect, firms will look at other ways to grow their business, such as advertising or adding to their product. This is known as non-price competition. A monopoly outcome, in terms of pricing, is an oligopoly's dream scenario, but this is difficult to achieve without good communication, which is not always possible. However, we can analyze how people behave in strategic situations to better understand how they will act in future scenarios. This theory is known as game theory. When analyzing game theory, we often use a payoff matrix, which is a fancy way of saying we make a grid of all possible outcomes and see which choice will leave us best off. A famous example of a payoff matrix is the prisoner's dilemma. The story goes that two prisoners are caught for some petty crime, for which they will both receive 1 year in prison. However, the police suspect they were involved in a larger crime, and so they tell the prisoners that if they confess and implicate their partner, they will be set free, and their partner will get 20 years. However, if both they and their partner confess, they will get 8 years. If both remain silent, they will each receive 1 year. It seems that the easiest option is for both prisoners to remain silent and accept 1 year. This is the most desirable option for the prisoners combined. However, remaining silent gives your partner a chance to implicate you, and that could result in you getting 20 years in prison. The maximum penalty for staying quiet is 20 years, and the maximum penalty for confessing is 8 years, so both prisoners will be keen to confess. This is known as the dominant strategy. That is, the best strategy for a player in the game, regardless of what any player does. It is interesting to observe this, as communication between the two prisoners would get them both a more desirable outcome, but because they can't communicate, the best option is no longer a good idea. This concept can be applied almost identically to oligopolies, as they must seek out a dominant strategy without knowing what their competitors will do. This dilemma can also have negative implications for society. If all firms involved take suboptimal strategies, society suffers as they lose out the potential benefits of having a cohesive monopoly-like market structure. Finally, a common incentive for firms to cooperate is the simple fact that they will interact with each other many times over the span of their existence. This means that it is in everyone's interest to get along, as business will be far smoother this way. There may even be scenarios where firms are so familiar with each other they appear to be colluding because they have very similar pricing schemes, among other things. This is known as tacit collusion, and it occurs when firms interact with each other a lot. Oligopolies tend to have high barriers to entry. Firstly, they benefit largely from economies of scale, and new entrants will have to charge higher prices as they try to become established in the market. This means that new entrants aren't competitively pricing their products and will lose out on market share. There is also a high setup cost associated with entering the market, which will deter potential entrants to the market. Oligopolistic firms may also choose to increase advertising, which will take away customers from new entrants who cannot afford to advertise as much. Brand proliferation is a strategy used to deter new entrants to a market by producing multiple products within a product line as different brands. Public policy. If oligopolists cooperate, there is a danger of them essentially acting as a monopoly over the market. As a result, competition law is created to prevent companies from merging or simply just cooperating, as this is contrary to public interest. Many people debate what competition law should prohibit, and it is still widely debated topic to this day. Some examples of business practices which are illegal under competition law include resale price maintenance, predatory pricing, and tying. Tying is the act of bundling multiple products together to try and force consumers to buy more than they wish.